Yay! Hey, how are you, Jessica?
Good. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I can hear
Awesome.
everything. So good to see you both. Thank you both for being here today. All right, so I wanted to start off with a little bit of an introduction. Today we're talking about navigating the holidays with little ones. The holidays can feel really daunting for parents, especially for parents with younger children. I know for myself personally, right around that time, I had a toddler who was about 3, and then I had about a 1.5-year-old. That was like peak chaos during that time. You know, they're both running around. They both have a lot of opinions, and yet like their executive functions are fully formed yet. And so it's just traveling. You know, you jimmy rig your house to fit your needs as a parent, but then when you're traveling, you don't always have those luxuries that you've set up for yourself in your own home. So yeah, I feel like this topic doesn't get addressed enough, and we're in the middle. We've already passed Thanksgiving, which I hope went well for you guys.
Yeah.
And I know that there are some holidays that you can come out of feeling like a champion parent, and then there are some holidays that, like for me personally, I truly wish I had never been embarked on in the first place. So to prevent that from happening, we have two experts here today. We have Jessica Irwin. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for being here. She is an occupational therapist, a pediatric occupational therapist, and childhood routine expert. You can find her handle at Rooted in Routine, and rooted is spelled ROO, Rooted in Routine. And then Lizzie O'Connor. Hi, Lizzie.
Hi, everyone.
She is a registered dietitian. Her handle on Instagram is at Mama Dietitian. She is a specialist in baby-led weaning. They've kindly offered their time to discuss how to make the most of your holidays, keep your children well nourished, keep yours and your children's sanity in check, boundaries in check, and help keep the family from getting overwhelmed and overstimulated during the holidays. So thank you both for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.
So I wanted to open up the conversation first when it comes to travel, because that's usually what comes first in the holidays. Jessica, can you tell us what are some common concerns for parents in traveling with little ones? And what are some common tips that you have for car or airplane travel with little kids?
Yeah. So it's definitely a lot to think about when you're traveling with little ones. I think the main 3 areas that parents are often concerned about or want to prepare for are sleep, feeding or eating, and just overall like behavior and stimulation and, crying and tantrums and all of that. So those 3 things are really the main ones. And I think for younger babies, sleep is a really big one, and feeding. They can be really big concerns for parents when they're traveling, because you want to, as best you can, like have your baby stick to their general routine. But when you're traveling, that typically goes off somehow. So the first thing to know is that that's okay. Know that travel days may not look exactly like a normal day at home, and that's okay. They may not nap when they typically do. Their feedings may be slightly off. But I do think, as best you can, you do want to attempt to mimic their home routine as much as possible within reason. You don't have to stress yourself out with it. So in terms of car, I guess we could talk about car first.
Yeah.
So car trips, a few things to consider for car trips is whether your baby typically sleeps well in the car or not. And if they do, or if they don't, you can kind of, if possible, time your journey, your trip around a nap time or not. So that can be helpful, just knowing your baby and kind of knowing how they tend to do in the car. One thing I love is, if you are planning a car nap, is to put a shade or a blanket or a towel or something over the window to darken the space when it is time for the nap. You can pull over and do that. And then rule of thumb is for babies is typically we want them to be out of their car seat to stretch their legs about every 2 hours, 2 to 3 max, which typically aligns well with feeds.
Yeah.
Whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding. So that's just a good rule of thumb to think about. And then actually this goes for both car and plane. I love diaper inserts. So there's like extra pads you can put in to soak up a little bit extra urine so that you maybe don't have to change them quite as frequently, or they don't leak at least.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you put the diaper underneath. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
you put them in and then you put the diaper on top.
Oh. You put the diaper on top of the insert?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so then okay, that makes sense.
It literally looks like a pad. It looks like a sanitary pad for when you have your period. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did something, so not in the car, but I did something similar when I was potty training, like for bedtime routine. I would do like the sheet and then the pee pad and then a sheet.
Yes.
Pad. And so if there was an accident, I could just rip off one layer and
yes.
Yeah, I love that tip. That trick.
That is such a good tip. Anything that, especially for long car travel, and you want to make a lengthy stop all the time. Otherwise, it can make it a much longer car ride.
Yeah.
So, helpful tip.
Yeah. And then just briefly for plane rides. So plane rides really can vary depending on the age of your child. So, younger babies will often sleep well. You do want to stick to their feeding, schedule or routine as best you can so that they're still getting nourished throughout the day. And if you are breastfeeding, you breastfeed on the plane. If you are bottle feeding, and whether it's breast milk or formula, you are allowed to bring as much as you need through security, through TSA. And pre-measuring out, if you were formula feeding, pre-measuring out the formula powder and the water can be so helpful, so that all you have to do is like pour it into the bottle and mix it around. So you're not like pouring it on the plane.
Pouring the water and the opening the cap with the nipple on the airplane.
Yeah, it can be like really stressful.
Yes.
And they make those like travel formula containers, like kind of like little snack like containers that stack, or just like are individuals that you can pre-measure formula in. Yes.
Formula dispensers, or like formula dispensers. Those are my favorite, and I didn't know about them. So I brought like a tin on the air. Going way back, but I brought a tin on the airplane, and pulling out the tin and you're scooping. And then by the time I arrived, I was staying with a mom friend of mine, and she was like, "You need a formula dispenser."
Yeah.
What are they? Here, you can have mine, because you're I thought it was like a mirror. I was like,
yeah, and those things are bulky, the tins. So definitely a formula dispenser. Just pre-measured powder so that you're not like measuring it. And then snacks for older babies and toddlers are obviously a game changer on planes. They can really help feed your baby or your toddler and entertain them. So I like small pieces of food, safe, as long as they're safe for your child's age, so that if you feed them one by one, it takes a lot of time.
Yes, we love snacks that, like you said, can entertain ones, like Puffs or Cheerios, or sometimes pouches work really well for little ones as well. I always say that you can never have enough snacks. So whatever number you think you need, it's best to double it. So you do not run out, because the worst thing to have is a hangry baby on an airplane or in the car. So just always having snacks ready available. And it's also important to make sure that you do like fat and protein. So like good snack ideas, like a hard-boiled egg or a cheese stick, or like yogurt, if you're able to have like an ice pack or something like that. Cottage cheese and fruit, things like that are good ideas for your little one.
Oh, I like the cottage cheese. Do they make cottage cheese in individuals?
They do. Yes.
Okay, that's brilliant. You could bring like cottage cheese and some, easy vegetables or easy fruit to like dip.
That's maybe Yeah, you can make it interactive, which is super helpful. So like like Jessica said, if you're having like a break to stretch, having a snack or something like that where it's interactive is super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I noticed in my child's daycare, they do a lot of Cheerios with the pipe cleaner.
Yes.
A lot of with pipe cleaners to practice that fine motor. But it's also just a brilliant activity. So
Yeah.
bring some pipe cleaners, bring some Cheerios.
Yes.
Make it a little game. I really do enjoy all of these tips. And no, those are fantastic. And I agree with the tip on doubling snacks. Like I don't think I've ever traveled and not gone through all my snacks.
Yeah.
Same.
All right. Well, we know a lot of families are coming together with extended family, with friends. We're still in the middle of in a pandemic, which adds another level of complexity to travel. There can be a lot of other children of different ages and a lot of different parenting styles. And there can be a lot of opinions too on like how you should be feeding your child, or how you should be raising them, or how much attention you should be giving them with regards to naps or crying. I know my parents personally, like they love to feed my children cookies. They're here right now and they brought 2 bags of cookies. Like they imported 2 bags of cookies with them when they flew down, and it's one of the ways they show their love. So Lizzie, what can parents do to help manage what their children are being fed?
Yeah.
And what are some things parents should be on the lookout for, like in terms of safety, and how do you ensure adequate nutrition? Okay, those are 3 questions.
Yeah, perfect. So that's, super important and very relevant in my life. I come from a big Italian family who also shows their love through food. So it can be challenging, but just kind of making sure you communicate with your family ahead of time, things that you want to prioritize. Your family best, so kind of, judge how the conversation will go. But it's good to give them a heads up. And especially with things like cookies, like kind of as an example, you can let them know like, hey, it's okay if my child has cookies, but I want to limit it to X amount per day, so that there's kind of a guideline. And then also, so you're not feeling like a food police or, getting your family members upset. You can kind of put it into a safety aspect as, if you want to feed my child, ask me first, and place the emphasis more on safety. Like I want to make sure that the food is okay for them or safe. And that's just to assure things like choking hazards. And just to remind your family that your child might have difficulty eating a certain kind of food. Depending on their age, it might need to be cut a certain way, or things they just aren't supposed to have at all, depending on their age.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's really good point. And I like the idea of talking to the people whose home you're staying at, your parents, ahead of time. Like instead of, and I think that's a really good recommendation. I think my parents generally will respond better to that than like don't give that. And also it's too late too. Like if they introduce the cookies and it's too late.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And then Jessica, what do you hear is most problematic when staying with the extended family or friends in terms of routine? And what can families do to help prevent little ones from getting overwhelmed or overstimulated?
Yeah, so I think the biggest concern most parents have is sleep. I think sleep can cause a lot of like anxiety in parents and just worry about whether they're going to sleep okay, because if they don't sleep okay, you often don't sleep well. And you don't want to be in that like chronic exhausted state and have your child be melting down because they're overtired. Nope, that's not fun. So sleep is definitely tricky. I think as best you can, this kind of goes along with the snack thing, but prepare ahead of time. So ask them what the room situation is like. Think about whether you're going to room share or they're going to have their own sleep space. Think about like where your baby or your child will be sleeping, and just really be prepared ahead of time in that regard. Yeah. And then in terms of like schedules and keeping them to that. So, it's actually really interesting. Depending on your child's age and their just general temperament, some babies and children are very adaptable with their sleep and flexible, and maybe like having an off nap or an off bedtime is okay and they can adapt. For others, they really are sensitive to sleep changes. So I always encourage parents to think about their specific child and think about past experiences so that you can prepare best for the future. So if you know your child tends to be really sensitive to a later bedtime or an off nap, then that might be one of your like kind of priorities, and setting the expectation ahead of time with your family that like, hey, my baby needs to nap at noon. Where can we have him nap? Just letting you know, let's plan the meal to be after that or before that, so that you can prepare. And other babies maybe are not so sensitive and you can kind of go with the flow a little bit more. So I really just encourage you to know your child personally. Like my son is 15 months and he's actually very adaptable with sleep. I think it's just part of his temperament, his personality. And I have to remind myself of that every time we're planning something or traveling, because he honestly does well. But I know my friends' babies and other children I've worked with don't. And it's not like you're doing anything wrong. It really is. It just comes down to temperament. So that's a big one.
No, that's a good point. I feel like grandparents, they sometimes forget, like they just assume all babies are like the ones that they raised.
Yeah.
So I think communicating that with them, like my baby's really sensitive and needs this, you know, maybe I wasn't.
Yeah.
and then I also remember like once my parents were more well versed, I was like, can you set up their room ahead of time? You know, they had a pack and play, and I had left like a baby monitor there, and I had left the sound machine, and so I was like, can you just set that all up, and so that when I get there I can just put that baby down.
I love that.
Yeah.
If it's a recurring place you tend to go, then like everybody starts to learn and understand the setup.
Yes. And I think most people do really want to help. They just don't, they might not know how.
Yeah.
No, that's super helpful. Sorry.
Yeah. Did I answer that fully? I think,
I think so. Lizzie, I wanted to ask you, what are some tips that you have on ensuring that babies and toddlers are well nourished, like once they get to, you know, said place, once they've
Perfect. So along with bringing plenty of snacks, it's important for little ones who are under 1 who are breastfed or formula fed that you stick to their schedule. So even if activities are going on, you know, communicating ahead of time, like so-and-so needs to, you know, feed every 2 to 3 hours, and kind of, you know, set alarms or timers on your phone so that even if you are, you know, busy, that you get reminded that it's time to feed your little one. That can really help to stay with that routine. For toddlers or kids that are a little bit older, making sure you have snacks or backup food just in case. Maybe, you know, you're supposed to have lunch at 2, but it's not ready yet, that, you know, the little one doesn't get too hungry or hangry waiting, that you have some snacks to feed them ahead of time, or even just some favorite healthy foods just in case they're not as crazy about what is being served for dinner. Another recommendation that I tell families is potentially using something like formula as a milk replacement in like recipes or as an additional nutrition boost. I've recommended Kabrita as an alternative to cow's milk when there's a sensitivity. And we've used the formula in cereal or oats kind of as an additional, you know, nutritional assurance, so that if we're not 100% sure how, you know, meals are going to go for that day, just kind of making sure we, you know, boost up in the morning with a really good breakfast.
Yes, I've definitely had the experience of like opening the cabinet and being like, okay, we have oatmeal, we have cereal.
Yes.
We don't have much else.
Yeah.
So yeah, to be able to like make that cereal and then you just add in the formula the same way you would prepare it in a bottle.
Yes. Exactly. So it's tough, you know, if you're staying at a family member's house and you just arrived, you know, the night before, you didn't go grocery shopping and you're not 100% sure what they're going to have for your little one to eat in the morning. So just making sure you have some key things to serve is super helpful.
Yes, that is super. I like the idea of the favorite, like having your favorite healthy foods, bringing them with you, and then whatever they serve, it's wonderful, thank you so much, and then you just like throw on a few little extra.
Exactly. And one tip that, I myself made the mistake of during Thanksgiving is not overflowing your little one's plate. That can be super overwhelming. So just start off with a little bit of each, and then you can add food as it goes, because when you sit down at that dining room table, it's super overwhelming, especially a lot of people like to watch the little ones eat. So just, not bombarding them with piles of food, just a little bit at a time is important.
Typically, and this is a sort of different question, but typically how long do you expect or anticipate said toddler to sit at the table for?
Okay. Honestly, it can be minutes that they're going to be, ready to eat. There's a lot of distractions and things like that. That's why sometimes it's important to have a snack or something before you sit down for the mealtime, because don't be discouraged if your child doesn't eat much of anything because they're just overstimulated at the table.
No, that's good to hear. I know, like for my, like, no, stay at the table. I think maybe it's just the way I was raised when I was little, but you stayed at the table for quite a long time, and it was about communicating with the family, which is all very true. That sense of community. I told my parents the other day, I was like, well, they're not gonna sit very long.
Yeah. This is where your Cheerios and the pipe cleaner come in handy, or a coloring book and crayons. You can bring that, ask, whoever's hosting, is it okay if, we have a few activities, so that they can still be at the table, but so they're entertained.
Yeah. The more we're talking, the more I realize this is about setting expectations with the people whose houses you're staying. Jessica, how do you integrate breastfeeding or formula feeding in the holiday routine? And can you share some tips on helping parents ensure that their little ones don't get overwhelmed and overstimulated?
Yeah, so for the younger babies, we've kind of mentioned this a couple times, but it is important to stick to your feeding routine and schedule. So, at least every 2 to 3 hours during the day. The younger babies are often, you can feed them in the large room with other people because they are kind of sleepier and they're not as distracted. The older babies, once they get in that like distracted feeding age, typically around like 5 months, I would say, and up, sometimes oftentimes you need to go to a quieter space to feed them. So if you're breastfeeding, that's a nice time for you and baby to have some like downtime, quiet time, help get them less overstimulated. If you're bottle feeding, involving a family member or a friend in giving them the bottle can be a great way for them to feel bonded and connected to your baby. So if you feel comfortable, you can offer or suggest somebody else feed them, and then you can guide whether you want that to be in the big, living room with everybody, or if you want them to go to a quieter space. And it is really nice to kind of have those like built-in breaks. That can really help babies who are younger to not get overstimulated by having some quiet time away from the group. And then toddlers and older kids, they will need you to kind of be their reminders to take little breaks like that. I think it is really important to kind of monitor them and anticipate whether you think they need a little bit of a break. I like, you can disguise this as anything. You don't have to tell them like, oh, we're taking a break because you're overstimulated. You can disguise it as like you need help with something in the other room, anything like that. But leaving a big, crowded, loud, bright, like busy space is important for little ones to not become super overstimulated. And knowing your child is also important, obviously, in this one.
That's a really good reminder, especially if there are other kids around. Fun. It's really fun. It's really active. I know my kids aren't going to want to remove themselves, but they might still need it. And I think as moms, as parents, you kind of have that sixth sense of like, when is this all going downhill for me? And so like get in first, get in ahead of time. And like you said, I like that distraction technique. Like, oh, I need your help in this room. And I also think if you're doing like the feeding, like you mentioned, in a separate room, you can extend that. Like you can feed and then extend. good
It's
tip.
tricky though, you know, you can't prevent every moment of overstimulation or like behavior meltdown or tantrum. So just know that too, it's very normal and common for young children to become overstimulated during the holidays.
Right.
And setting your expectations like maybe a little bit lower than they are on a normal day can also just help yourself like function better.
Right, because ultimately we want to have a good time too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ultimately, have a good time too. Lizzie, I have a question here from our audience. Any tips for feeding a baby-led weaning 9-month-old dinner on the plane?
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, again, making sure you have snacks, some protein foods, things like that. Making sure you have a bib, and maybe even like a placemat or something that you can serve the food on. I like, you know, little containers or something like a bento box where you can kind of compartmentalize different foods. With baby-led weaning, you never know what your baby's going to be interested in, but just making sure that you have the food already cut up in safe shapes and sizes for your little one so that it's just easy for them to grab and go. If you have a connection or a layover that, and you can kind of push the feeding to that time, and you're not rushing and running to your connection, that might be a good time to kind of sit down, find a quiet spot in the airport, and have your child eat.
So you'll bring a mat with you. That's
Yeah, they make ones that are like silicone that roll up, and it literally fits perfectly over, you know, the tray table that pops down. And this way too, you, even if it's a messy, you just roll it up. And some of them have sleeves where you even put it in the sleeve. So if it's like crumbs and things, you just deal with it when you land. It's game changing.
That is a brilliant hack, and I wish I was like putting napkins, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Day and age where everything is, you know, everything. Great.
Another thing that we use is those disposable placemats that stick to the table. Have you ever seen them? They're thin.
Yep, they just throw it away.
Yeah, so I love those
I'm
for
taking
like
notes. Yes, disposable placemats are brilliant.
and they stick. So like I like those for restaurants because even though the restaurant will clean up after your baby, it's literally a huge mess. So
Yes.
I stick that down. And then also you're not putting the food like on the tray or on the table directly, which is kind of gross.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of the reusable one too, obviously for like other moments.
Yeah, no. And I just saw a comment here, ear safety gear. And I think, yeah, some kids are than others, but certainly like protecting their ears against, I mean, it's loud.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. Okay, well, we are out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise, sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it. And also, I just want to make sure that if you wanted to find Jessica on Instagram, you can find her at Rooted in Routine. And if you want to find Lizzie O'Connor, you can find her at Mama Dietitian. Please follow them. They're wonderful, and we love working with you both. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
This is so much fun. I hope we can do it again.
I know. And happy holidays to everybody.
Yes. Everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.